The state attorney general for Arizona says prosecutions continue. Chris Mays announced on Sunday she has no intention of dropping charges against the Republicans indicted by a grand jury for participating in the 2020 presidential election false elector scheme. Bad news for Rudy Giuliani, who was also under indictment in Georgia. Bad news for Trump's former White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who is also under indictment in Georgia. Giuliani, Meadows, along with former Trump attorney Christina Bobb, Arizona GOP chair Kelly Ward, and several others were indicted earlier this year for filing fraudulent documents when they offered up a phony slate of Trump electors for the state of Arizona. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays said, quote, a grand jury, this is what she said yesterday, a grand jury in the state of Arizona decided that these individuals who engaged in an attempt to overthrow our democracy in 2020 should be held accountable, so we won't be cowed, we won't be intimidated, unquote. Because these are state crimes, if found guilty, the defendants would not be eligible for a presidential pardon. The trial is scheduled for 2026. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who serves as the number 3 in the Republican House leadership, she took Liz Cheney's old job. Elise Stefanik has been offered the job of ambassador to the United Nations by Donald Trump. Stefanik is married to Matt Manda, the public affairs manager for the firearm industry's top trade association called the National Shooting Sports Foundation. According to Rolling Stone magazine, his organization's board members include the CEO of Daniel Defense, whose AR-15 was used by the Uvalde shooter. Other board members, according to Rolling Stone, include top executives from Smith & Wesson, Glock, Beretta, Sturm Ruger & Company, and Hornady, which, according to Rolling Stone, manufactures ammunition it advertises as accurate, deadly, dependable. The United Nations was established after World War II to end all war. Donald Trump has reportedly appointed the repugnant Tom Homan as our nation's new border czar. Homan served as Trump's head of ICE and continues to defend the Trump administration's policy of separating families. In fact, many call him the father of the family separation policy, so we should separate him from it. In February of 2018, Homan said politicians who support and implement policies that create sanctuary cities for migrants should be arrested and charged with crimes, although he didn't specify what the crimes are. In July, he announced to a group of conservatives, quote, if Donald Trump comes back in January, I'll be on his heels, coming back with him, and I will run the biggest deportation force this country has ever seen. They ain't seen S-H-I-T, I'm not going to say it, he said it, yet. Wait until 2025, unquote. Well, less than a week after the election, we know what we have to do. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he refuses to concede Democratic Senator Bob Casey's loss in Pennsylvania. Republican hedge fund manager David McCormick is leading there by 0.6 of a percentage point, with the race still too close to call, with 5% of the ballots uncounted. Schumer said he, therefore, will not invite McCormick to an orientation reserved for new members of the Senate, and this is getting under the skin of Republicans because things get under their skin. The Biden administration said 50,000 Russian troops, including soldiers from North Korea, are preparing to reclaim parts of the Kursk region taken by the Ukrainian army. Meanwhile, Russia said it shot down 32 drones over Moscow on Sunday as Ukraine unleashed a massive wave of drone strikes, causing 3 Russian airports to be shut down. 1 woman was hospitalized with burns. This is the mop-up for November 11th, 2014. It's Armistice Day. Maybe Armistice Day, but I've only just begun to fight. Trump always loses, even when he wins. And we need to remember what winning actually means. There are battles, and then there are wars. Elections are battles. And never forget, some battles come at such a heavy cost, the victor soon discovers they lost the war. A Pyrrhic victory means an army won a seemingly important battle, but they end up losing the war, and often that victory is why they lost it. Or maybe Aesop's fables put it best. Be careful what you wish for, lest it come true. This story has not been written. LBJ won in 1964 by one of the largest landslides in American history. 4 years later, he limped out of the Oval Office, choosing not to run again. It was the worst 4 years of his life, practically killed him. By the way, he lost to Barry Goldwater, the father of modern conservatism, which has helped unwind many of Johnson's greatest accomplishments. Nixon, reelected in 1972 by one of the largest landslides in American history, within 2 years, out of office. George Herbert Walker Bush won the Gulf War as president. He won it in 1991, and he had the highest approval rating ever recorded by a U.S. president. So no Democrat would run against him because they thought he was unbeatable. Within 2 years of having the highest approval rating of any U.S. president, George Herbert Walker Bush was out of a job, and Bill Clinton became the new president. In the grand scheme of things, Nixon's win in 72, Bush's defeat of Iraq in 91, Trump's win in 2016, they were all Pyrrhic victories. I believe Trump's victory last Tuesday is also Pyrrhic. A Pyrrhic victory, again, is a win that comes at such a great sacrifice. The general often wonders if they would have been better off having been defeated. When George W. Bush toppled Saddam Hussein and declared mission accomplished, that was a Pyrrhic victory. Yes, he won the battle for Iraq, but he lost the war. He defeated Saddam Hussein. He defeated the Taliban. But those were all Pyrrhic victories. I don't have to remind you how Iraq and Afghanistan turned out. Be careful thinking Donald Trump won, because he always ends up losing. His father left him $500 million. He lost it all. 4, 6, how many bankruptcies? Whatever you give this man, he will destroy it, including the office of the presidency. He did it once, he's going to do it again because he can't help himself. Somehow, he will find a way to once again destroy what has been given to him. He always does. His casinos, his inheritances, his real estate, his marriages, his adult children, and everybody who works for him. You give something or someone to Donald Trump, he will ruin it. He will ruin that person. He ruins everything and everyone around him. Always. He's consistent. Yes, he won in 2016, but then his 4 years It was a personal disaster for him, the Republican Party, and our country. And he lost re-election. Would you ever want to trade places with Donald Trump? Is there anything he has that you would want? Would you want to have been him during his first 4 years in the Oval Office? Would you have wanted to have been Donald Trump during the 4 years he was out of the White House? Be careful thinking he just won. Yes, he's returning to the Oval Office, and yes, he has both chambers of Congress and the Supreme Court. And yes, he's dangerous, but we still have the lower courts, the civil courts. Federalism, states' rights is alive and well. We still have the governors and democratically controlled state legislatures. We still have halfway decent Republican governors like DeWine in Ohio and even Kemp in Georgia. It's hard for me to say Kemp is decent, but he behaved properly in 2020 when Trump tried to steal the election. They still believe in something resembling the rule of law. This is an opportunity, once again, for us to prove we're right, they're wrong. In 279 BC, King Pyrrhus beat the Romans, but most of his soldiers and his best officers were killed. King Pyrrhus reportedly said, quote, "One more such victory and we are lost." That's what a Pyrrhic victory is. Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Steve Bannon, Boris Epstein, to name just a few, are still on trial in state courts, and Trump cannot pardon them. Republicans in Arizona, Nevada are still on trial for the false elector scheme. Republicans in Georgia are still going to be on trial for the false elector scheme. Republican lawyers like John Eastman, Rudy Giuliani, Kenneth Chesebro, and probably former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, they have either lost their law licenses or are about to. The Mike Pillow guy broke. The list goes on and on. Everyone who works with or for Donald Trump gets burned, indicted. They go broke. They lose their license to practice law or their marriage. Donald Trump might have partial immunity, but the people around him do not. This is far from over. Trump's new White House staff would be wise to remember that back in July, the Supreme Court gave the president partial immunity for crimes he commits performing his official role as president. But the Supreme Court didn't say anything about his accomplices. And our government, our military, is very clear on this. You are not allowed to follow orders that are illegal. It is still a crime to be one of Donald Trump's enablers. Maybe he can't get prosecuted, but you can. For example, a federal judge on Saturday ordered Rudy Giuliani to turn over his 4 prized World Series rings to the Georgia election workers, to whom he lost a $148 million defamation suit after he falsely accused them of stuffing ballots for Joe Biden back in 2020. Again, Rudy is still under indictment down in Georgia for trying to overturn the 2020 election. And he was indicted in Arizona for the false elector scheme. I just told you that will continue. There are 2 criminal trials, Arizona and Georgia, that Trump cannot pardon Rudy Giuliani for. Plus, Rudy lost the defamation lawsuit, and he's now on trial in a civil court for wage theft and rape. There's nothing Trump can do to help him. According to ABC News, those 4 World Series rings are valued at $200,000. Giuliani insisted the rings are no longer part of his estate and that he gave them to his idiot son Andrew as a gift. The judge warned Giuliani that if he doesn't turn over all his possessions, including the World Series rings, to the election workers by today, Rudy will be in contempt of court and will face jail time. And there's nothing Donald Trump can do. Among the property that was supposed to be handed over was Rudy's 1980 Mercedes convertible, once owned by actress Lauren Bacall. It's now valued at $4,000. Instead of turning it over, Giuliani, seen here, was driven in it on Election Day to his Palm Beach, Florida polling station to cast his ballot. It's the same polling precinct Donald and Melania also vote in. Look at the arrogance. Look at him smiling, refusing to turn over his Mercedes. It strikes me as hard to believe that your client couldn't get someone at the storage facility to open up the storage facility to retrieve his property. Those are the words of Louis Lyman, the presiding U.S. District Judge, federal, overseeing the case, the Rudy Giuliani case. Judge Lyman was appalled last week when he learned that lawyers for the 2 poll workers showed up at Giuliani's $5 million New York apartment to take receivership of it, only to discover the apartment had been completely emptied out, with no paintings, very little furniture, and all the valuables missing. Rudy's lawyer told the judge he moved the valuables to a storage facility, and then Rudy told the judge he didn't know how to access that storage facility, and then added he thought he was being treated very rudely by the judge. After Thursday's hearing, Rudy told reporters that this is a political prosecution. Then, like Donald Trump after the first E. Jean Carroll defamation lawsuit, Rudy Giuliani opened himself up to yet another lawsuit by insisting once again that, quote, I did not defame those 2 ladies. He's going to get sued again. This is a pattern with Rudy Giuliani. He will admit to defaming the 2 workers when he's in court. He'll argue in court that, yes, what I said was wrong, but I didn't intend to harm them. Therefore, that $158 million judgment against me is way too high. Then immediately, when court is dismissed, after he acknowledges he defamed them, he goes before a bank of microphones on the courthouse steps and insists, I didn't defame those 2 women. What I said about them is true, and I have evidence that they committed election fraud. This is also what he did during the run-up to January 6. Now, he lost 60 cases attempting to prove election fraud in court. He told the judges, these hearings right now, they're not about voter fraud. And the judges would then ask, so what are they about? And Rudy would say, they're about theories of voter fraud. The judge would throw him out of their courtroom. The case gets also thrown out, and Rudy would walk right outside on the courthouse steps before a bank of microphones and tell reporters, I am appealing this judge's ruling. This judge is partisan. He won't allow me to present evidence of voter fraud. There is no evidence of voter fraud to present. By the way, Rudy is the top of the food chain in the whole election denial conspiracy. He's right underneath Donald Trump. Rudy was the lead attorney, and the lead investigator claiming to prove voter fraud. What's so important about this defamation lawsuit, as well as the defamation lawsuits filed against him by Dominion and Smartmatic, as well as the defamation lawsuits filed against Fox News and Newsmax by Dominion and Smartmatic, and of course the defamation lawsuits filed against Alex Jones by the families of the Sandy Hook survivors. What's so important about these defamation lawsuits is that Rudy Giuliani, Alex Jones, and of course Donald Trump are utterly convinced they are free to lie with abandon. They can lie to the media, they can lie anywhere and everywhere except when they're under oath. We still have civil courts that know the difference between freedom of speech and defamation. And that is why it's important to remember sitting presidents are subject to civil trials for damages unrelated to their years inside the Oval Office. In other words, Donald Trump next year can be sued in a civil courtroom next year. He can be sued for damages committed before 2017 when he became president. He can also be sued for anything he did between the years 2021 and 2025 when he was a private citizen. You can sue Donald Trump in a civil court. You can sue soon-to-be President Donald Trump in a civil court for something he did before he became president in 2017 and for something he did during the 4 years Biden was president. You're looking at Paula Jones. She sued President Bill Clinton for sexual harassment while President Clinton was president of the United States. The Supreme Court in Clinton v. Jones back in 1997, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously, all 9 judges ruled that a sitting president can be sued in a civil court for damages related to activities before the president became president. The court said such a civil lawsuit, like Paula Jones, must not be delayed until after the president leaves office. That means Donald Trump can still be sued in a civil court for damages resulting in anything he did before becoming president or during the 4 years he wasn't president and Joe Biden was. To refresh your memory, Paula Jones sued Bill Clinton for damages suffered when he was governor of Arkansas. She accused him of sexually harassing him while he was governor of Arkansas before he was president of the United States. And the Supreme Court ruled unanimously a sitting president of the United States is not too busy to be deposed in a civil lawsuit over something he did before he was president. This is President Bill Clinton. This is a picture of him during his second deposition that he was forced to give. Actually, this is testimony before a grand jury while president. Now, in a civil lawsuit filed by Paula Jones, who claimed he sexually harassed her while he was governor of Arkansas, he sat for a deposition and was asked, did you have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky while you were president of the United States? Now, that question asked by Paula Jones' attorneys was part of a sting operation created by Kenneth Starr, the Whitewater prosecutor, who was looking for anything to get Bill Clinton on. Starr they couldn't get him on anything. It was called the Whitewater investigation. They couldn't get him on Whitewater. But then Ken Starr learned from Linda Tripp a co-worker of Monica Lewinsky's over at the Pentagon, that Lewinsky was messing around with President Clinton inside the Oval Office. So Linda Tripp contacted Kenneth Starr, and Kenneth Starr arranged with Paula Jones's lawyers to ask Bill Clinton during the deposition about Monica Lewinsky. And they knew, Kenneth Starr knew, this was a sting operation, that Bill Clinton would probably try to commit perjury, deny that he was messing around with Monica Lewinsky. Bill Clinton, under oath during the first Paula Jones deposition, was asked, did you have sex with Monica Lewinsky? And he said no. He was then called back before Kenneth Starr's grand jury to clarify his statement. And he was asked, did you perjure yourself? And Clinton pretty much said it all depends on what your meaning of sex is. Clinton, like many married men, didn't consider certain acts of intimacy to be sex. He said before the grand jury that sex is intercourse, and that anything and everything leading up to sexual intercourse doesn't constitute sex. Did Bill Clinton perjure himself? It all depends on your definition of sex. I'm going to play you a statement he made during his testimony before Kenneth Starr's grand jury. Now, this was, I believe, 1998, and it should have been enough. This should have ended it. Not necessarily the Paula Jones civil trial for sexual harassment, but I'm talking about ending Kenneth Starr's investigation into President Bill Clinton. Kenneth Starr was unable to find any dirt on the Clintons, despite spending $52 million and 4 years looking for anything. The only thing he could come up with was Bill Clinton might have perjured himself during a deposition in the Paula Jones civil lawsuit. Again, he was asked, did you have sex with Monica Lewinsky? He said no. Kenneth Starr said, great, we got him on perjury. Clinton came back before the grand jury and made the following statement. Listen to this statement. This should have been the end of it, but it led to his impeachment. It tied up the news cycle for more than a year and temporarily crippled Bill Clinton's presidency while Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden grew stronger. Listen.
When I was alone with Miss Lewinsky on certain occasions in early 1996 and once in early 1997, I engaged in conduct that was wrong. These encounters did not consist of sexual intercourse. They did not constitute sexual relations as I understood that term to be defined at my January 17, 1998 deposition. But they did involve inappropriate, intimate contact. These inappropriate encounters ended at my insistence in early 1997. I also had occasional telephone conversations with Ms. Lewinsky that included inappropriate sexual banter. I regret that what began as a friendship came to include this conduct, and I take full responsibility for my actions. While I will provide the grand jury whatever other information I can, because of privacy considerations affecting my family, myself, and others, and in an effort to preserve the dignity of the office I hold. This is all I will say about the specifics of these particular matters. I will try to answer to the best of my ability other questions, including questions about my relationship with Ms. Lewinsky, questions about my understanding of the term sexual relationship, as I understood it to be defined at my January 17, 1998 deposition.
Okay. A sitting president can be sued in a civil courtroom for damages he inflicted before he was president or after he was president and waiting to become president again. I refuse to accept, if Donald Trump becomes the next president, that there aren't lawyers. I refuse to accept that there aren't lawyers who will be taking him to civil court the same way Bill Clinton had to testify in the Paula Jones lawsuit. It was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court that sitting presidents have to testify and can be sued in a civil court for damages they inflicted before becoming president. Special counsel Jack Smith is winding down his prosecutions of Donald Trump. Donald Trump will not go on trial for the Washington, D.C. election interference indictment. There were several unindicted co-conspirators who we assume Smith would end up indicting as well after he secured a guilty verdict for Donald Trump. That trial was supposed to be done and dusted, as they say, by March of this year, but the Supreme Court dragged its feet on the presidential immunity decision. They waited until July to send it back down to the lower court to parse out what crimes Trump could be charged with that didn't fall under the protective umbrella of official acts as president. Now, theoretically, Jack Smith could keep going until January 20th and force Trump to fire him, the same way Nixon fired Archibald Cox. And back then, when Nixon fired Archibald Cox, that was the first nail in Richard Nixon's coffin. It proved his guilt. I don't understand why Merrick Garland and Jack Smith are winding this down. I understand it is the Justice Department's official policy not to prosecute a sitting president. The Supreme Court just ruled that former presidents can be tried for some crimes they committed in the Oval Office. Well, why not pursue justice all the way down to the wire until January 20th? Why not call a grand jury now to look into Trump's probable wire fraud, how he raised hundreds of millions of dollars after leaving office to investigate election fraud, but none of that money was spent on proving election fraud. Why not force Trump to shut down the investigation once he's president? Why not force him to fire Jack Smith the same way he fired Jim Comey? And why not prosecute the unindicted co-conspirators? Why not indict them and force Trump to pardon them, to fire Jack Smith? You saw what the Republicans were willing to do to Bill Clinton over a deposition in the Paula Jones civil trial. Force Donald Trump to pardon the unindicted co-conspirators after you indict them. Smith is also winding down the classified documents case. Well, what about Trump's valet, Walt Nauta? He was indicted. He gets to skate as well. Trump's valet suddenly has presidential immunity. Judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, threw the classified documents case out, saying the office of special counsel is unconstitutional. Really? That's what she decided. She based this all on a concurring opinion from Clarence Thomas in the court's July presidential immunity ruling. Now, Smith was hoping to appeal Eileen Cannon's ruling to the Supreme Court. Is he not going to appeal that ruling? Does this now mean there will be no more special counsels while Donald Trump is president? Merrick Garland, our Attorney General, seems to be getting rid of the pretense of an impartial judiciary once Trump becomes president. It looks like he's just giving up. He's saying, okay, that's it. Harris lost. Trump's going to be president. And that means the entire Justice Department is now Donald Trump's personal legal firm. If you believe in the rule of law, you keep enforcing it until January 20th. You keep bringing indictments, grand juries, force Trump to fire Jack Smith, force him to shut down the investigation, force him to issue pardons. Everyone is saying, well, Trump's going to get away with it. No. He never gets away with anything. He lost the Manhattan criminal trial. Now, who knows how Judge Juan Merchan is going to rule in terms of the sentencing. Trump is appealing the ruling. Theoretically, Juan Merchan this month could send Donald Trump to jail right now. Have him go to jail, and he could still appeal, but theoretically, he's not going to do it. But Trump can't pardon himself for the conviction in the Manhattan criminal trial, where he was found guilty. He lost the E. Jean Carroll trial. He lost the New York State Attorney General's trial. He has to pay $500 million fine for defrauding lenders. Now, that's a civil lawsuit filed by the New York State Attorney General for fraud he committed before he was president in 2017. We are promised that presidential immunity and his pardon powers do not extend to state criminal trials, and they don't extend to federal civil lawsuits or state civil lawsuits. Remember Bill Clinton's Paula Jones trial? I'm going to keep telling you, sitting presidents can be sued in civil courts for crimes they committed when they weren't president. And what about the RICO trial down in Georgia? There will be a hearing in March of next year to determine whether Fani Willis should be allowed to stay on as prosecutor because of what Trump's attorneys call an improper relationship with her lead lawyer. Fani Willis was reelected last Tuesday. Does the Supreme Court's July immunity ruling apply to state courts? I'm almost positive it doesn't. And what about all the others in that RICO indictment? Mark Meadows and Rudy Giuliani. They still have to be tried. We were assured Donald Trump as president cannot pardon people for state crimes. So why would anyone think that the RICO trial down in Georgia won't continue? Now, maybe it won't continue without Donald Trump. maybe this will go before the Supreme Court, and the court will rule that sitting presidents cannot be tried in a criminal courtroom, in a state criminal courtroom. So he probably can't go on trial in Georgia, but the rest of them can. President Clinton sat for 2 depositions, sat before a grand jury after he was reelected. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously presidents can be sued in civil court for crimes they committed when they weren't president. Why should it be any different for Donald Trump? There must be thousands of people who have reason to sue Donald Trump in civil court for something he did in the past 4 years or before 2017. E. Jean Carroll won on a sexual assault that happened decades ago. That was because of a special law that was passed in the state of New York, and it's expired. Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, won a $500 million judgment against Trump in a civil court on fraud that Trump committed before he was president. What exposure does Trump have right now in our civil courts for damages he caused during the 4 years before he became president again? What about a class action suit filed on behalf of donors to his Save America PAC? And he doesn't get to skate on the E. Jean Carroll fine or the $500 million fine. He has to appeal that now in the state of New York. That appeals process, according to the Supreme Court, unanimously, has to continue now. According to a recent Kinsey survey, 1 out of 6 women are not sexually active right now. According to a dating app, 43% of black female Gen Z daters say they are refraining from sex. You are looking at something called the 4B movement strike. Took place in South Korea in 2019. 4B in North Korea stands for, here are the 4 Bs, and I have no idea how to pronounce this. The 4 Bs are bisexu, bione, bihan, and bikulsen. 4B. So, what are the 4 Bs? No sex, bisexu. No dating, bione. No marriage, bihon. And no having children with men, bikulsen. For the next 4 years, 4B. That was North Korea. Now, some American women are urging other women to refrain from men entirely for the next 4 years. What do you think? What do you think? You might remember that I warned you that after abortion, Republicans would be coming for contraception as well as no-fault divorce. No-fault divorce is you can get divorced because you want to, and a lot of religious relics in the Republican Party think no-fault divorce is unfair to men and has destroyed the family union. And there's been a lot of talk on the right to start getting rid of no-fault divorce state by state. The Washington Post reported yesterday that since Trump won, women in red states have begun Googling the words no-fault divorce, and some are saying to get their divorce now while they still can. The Post says no-fault divorce is not yet a national issue, but there are deeply religious men who are trying to get it reversed in Texas. And J.D. Vance, no surprise here, in recent interviews said he would like to reconsider no-fault divorce. He said, women who leave abusive husbands end up damaging the family unit. I showed you that quote. A lot of men think it's unfair that women who they abuse can just divorce them. This is the mop-up for November 11th, 2024. It's Armistice Day, but I've only just begun to fight, and I hope you are going to fight for your country peacefully and legally. Legally, we have to stop this ogre, this monstrosity, Homan, who's going to be the new border czar. Find out where the ICE detention centers are, and I will get a list of immigration groups who you should donate to. We have to fight this before January 20th. We have to draw the line now and stop these deportations. Business people don't want these deportations. So Republican businessmen, you saw what the Republican governor of Ohio, DeWine, said. You saw what Republican businessmen in Springfield, Ohio, said about the Haitian migrants, Haitian immigrants. We need them. Don't deport them. So we're going to have to appeal to Republican lawmakers, Republican business people. And we may have to boycott certain companies. Here's a company you shouldn't boycott. Yeah, you should. This is the first company, shopdavidfeldman.com. Check out the garbage over at shopdavidfeldman.com. Shopdavidfeldman.com. There's the Trump coffee mugshot. It's a mugshot. It's a coffee mugshot. You might want to buy that. Isn't that nice? Don't you want to wake up looking at that every day? Thank you, Fonnie Willis. What else we have here? This is a gift for your MAGA moron relatives for Thanksgiving. It's a souvenir coffee mug from Donald Trump's 2029 inauguration. That's him and Melania. He looks like a zombie Lou Dobbs in this, we lost Lou Dobbs this year. Such a tragedy. And you might want to get your MAGA moron friend a Trump 28 coffee mug. It's not too soon to start planning for the next election that we won't be having. And anybody attending the inauguration, buy them an official Trump fart filtration mask. It's what the pros use. You might remember a lot of Trump supporters flew an appeal to heaven flag in the lead up to and during January 6th. Judge Alito's wonderful wife flew an appeal to heaven flag at their vacation home. Speaker Mike Johnson has an appeal to heaven flag right outside his office door to show he's an apostolic Christian who wants to conquer the seven mountains. And, of course, they carried an appeal to heaven flag into the Capitol on January 6th, along with a couple of Confederate flags. So, pick up my flag over at shopdavidfeldman.com. It's an appeal to D's Nuts flag. I haven't offered this up for a while. This is what you want to get. You want to get an appeal to D's Nuts flag. It's beautiful. Isn't that great? Here's Cassidy modeling my Still a Democrat t-shirt. Comes in all sizes, and you can also pick up a Still a Democrat coffee mug. There's also my favorite, Donald Trump and Edvard Munch's The Scream. You know, I was really hoping all this stuff would be irrelevant I was thinking it'd be nice if, well, I guess they're totems to remind us that there are more of our people than his people. And Thanksgiving, of course, is right around the corner. It's going to be a rough one. Doesn't have to be. Pick up my chef's apron with the words, "Hope you're in the mood for diarrhea." What a great Thanksgiving gift for your relatives. And a Christmas gift. And I hope you're in the mood for diarrhea. Chef's apron. All right. Trump said yesterday that no offer will be on the table for Mike Pompeo to come work inside his White House. Pompeo served as Trump's CIA director and Secretary of State. Pompeo has said repeatedly that he supports funding for Ukraine and was critical of Trump's mishandling of classified documents. Trump says no room for Nikki Haley in his second term. Nikki Haley served as his ambassador to the United Nations during his first round in the White House. She, of course, was the last candidate standing in the race for the Republican nomination. She kept offering to campaign for Trump, but he turned her down while warning anyone who ever donated to her campaign will not be welcome in MAGA world. Haley has also made it clear, like Mike Pompeo, that she supports funding Ukraine's war in Russia. Don't be disloyal. It's all about loyalty. This is Mike Davis. He's a lawyer, very active with the Federalist Society, and supposedly, at least he was claiming, that he's helping Trump staff the Justice Department. Some have said he's even being considered as a possible attorney general. Mike Davis worked as a Republican counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee. He is now warning that special counsel Jack Smith is about to face his own legal problems. And in a very vulgar statement, he warned New York State Attorney General Letitia James not to bring criminal charges against Donald Trump, or else he's going to put her blankety blank in prison. Well, he's not the Attorney General yet, and already he's threatening to lock up New York State Attorney General Letitia James. He's also promising to indict the entire Biden family, pardon the January 6ers, and fill Gitmo with detainees. He's told Liz Cheney, you better lawyer up. And then, bragging that he's staffing the Justice Department, he took to Twitter and wrote this. Dear Trump job seekers, long time no chat. Before asking me for help, I'm going to ask you to provide me specific and concrete evidence of your loyalty to Trump. If you cannot provide a lot of that, stop asking me. Political appointments require both competency and loyalty. Great. After that tweet, Mike Davis announced that he is not going to be working in the White House and that he is not actually helping with the staffing. We'll see. Keep an eye on Mike Davis. You're looking at Chris LaCivita. He invented swift boating back in 2004. 20 years later, he became Donald Trump's campaign manager. Now, this is a nice story. This is a nice story. You'll like this. Well, an article last month appeared in the Daily Beast suggesting that Chris LaCivita was bleeding the Donald Trump presidential campaign dry, with his LLC collecting more than $19 million in fees from the Republican Party. According to The Independent, when Trump heard about this Daily Beast article, he flipped out and called Chris LaCivita, his co-campaign manager, and forced him to produce bank statements and FEC filings to prove he wasn't getting paid that much. Well, the Daily Beast is not backing down from their claim that Chris LaCivita's LLC pocketed roughly $19 million from the Trump campaign. And now Politico reports that the Daily Beast probably got this information about Chris LaCivita's big payday from Trump's very first campaign manager and serial abuser, Corey Lewandowski. Let me go large here. Now, let's see here, Corey Lewandowski. Back in 2016, Lewandowski had to step down after he was caught on tape physically assaulting a female reporter for Breitbart. He was then accused of sexually assaulting several women, including the wife of a wealthy Republican donor. I'm sorry, this is from an old slide. What does it say here? Politico, what does it say here? Lewandowski cast out a Trump operation after allegations of unwanted sexual advances. New York Times, Corey Lewandowski, Donald Trump's campaign manager, is charged with battery. Politico, Trump donor Corey Lewandowski made unwanted sexual advances. ABC News singer Joy Villa says she wants justice to be served in sexual assault allegation against Corey Lewandowski. That's from last year. It's an old slide. Well, this year, he got relieved of his duties in 2016. He couldn't be Trump's campaign manager because he was caught on tapes physically assaulting a female reporter for Breitbart. But this year, Trump said, I miss you. I want to bring you back. Let's have some fun. And he brought Lewandowski back as sort of a minister without portfolio, to basically serve as an agent of chaos within the campaign, keeping everybody underneath Trump unsure of themselves. That's how we've all had bosses like Trump. You bring somebody in like Corey Lewandowski to make sure that the people who think they're in charge get worried that they're not actually in charge. Trump undermines anybody underneath him who is in a position of authority. Well, according to Politico, Lewandowski is probably the one who leaked that story about Chris LaCivita's big payday. There's reason to believe that Lewandowski was the one who went to the Daily Beast and said, you should take a look at how Chris LaCivita is bilking Donald Trump. Now, according to Atlantic Magazine, Lewandowski was creating so much friction when he was brought back. By September, Trump called him in and said, look, I got to sideline you. I brought you back. You can still work on this campaign, but you're not the campaign manager. Susie Wiles, who's now going to be his chief of staff, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita are my campaign managers. They're going to quit if you don't back off, and I need them. Supposedly, I think, I'm not sure, but after that conversation, Lewandowski leaked the information about Chris LaCivita's payday. Now, LaCivita denies he got paid $19 million by the Trump campaign, but the Daily Beast, from last time I checked, isn't backing down from that claim. According to Politico, this is why I have faith, okay? According to Politico, when it became apparent Trump was going to win last Tuesday night, Corey Lewandowski walked up to Chris LaCivita to congratulate him, to offer his hand as a gesture of peace. And Chris LaCivita reportedly began poking Lewandowski in the chest and began screaming, and I'm going to clean it up, F you, but he didn't say F, he said the whole word. F you, and F you, and he's poking Lewandowski in the chest. You have effed with the wrong person. I'm going to effing destroy you, unquote. The next day, Lewandowski announced, I won't be working in the new Trump administration. So what's the message in all this? Thanksgiving is coming up. Don't fight with your MAGA moron uncle or aunt at Thanksgiving. I promise you, they will feast upon themselves. Leave them alone. You saw how the Republicans governed the House of Representatives for the past 2 years. That is prologue to the next 2 years. You have to fight them in the courts. You have to challenge them politically. Don't waste your time fighting with a MAGA moron. If they can't lash out at you, they will feast upon themselves. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor said she's staying put. This after several prominent liberals called for the 70-year-old Obama nominee to step aside so Joe Biden could replace her during a lame duck session instead of Trump possibly replacing her if she decides to retire during his administration. So what are we looking at right now when it comes to the House of Representatives and the Senate? The Republicans do not have a filibuster-proof Senate. But when it comes to passing tax cuts or a budget, they just need a simple majority. When it comes to the Supreme Court, as well as other judicial nominees, they just need a simple majority in the Senate. Again, the House of Representatives has no say in judicial appointments or cabinet picks. It's starting, unfortunately, to look like Republicans will have a trifecta for the next 2 years. Democrats seem to have failed to wrest control of the House of Representatives from Republicans who now are guaranteed control of the Senate and, of course, the White House. In the House of Representatives, the magic number is 218. Whichever party gets to 218, get 218 seats, you gain control. Republicans have 213. They are just 5 away, with 17 races that have yet to be called. Most of them are likely, probably, definitely going to be won by Republicans. So, less than a week after the election, we pretty much know it's Trump. Republicans have the Senate, not a filibuster-proof Senate, and they also have the House. Federalism, states' rights, the civil courts. There are things we can do to stop this. Florida Senator Marco Rubio said he would endorse Florida Senator Rick Scott for Senate Majority Leader. That's a position currently held, well, it was held by Senator Mitch McConnell. He's now the Minority Leader, but when the new Congress is sworn in, the Republican leader will be the Majority Leader. Reelected in 2022, current Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky announced this year he would be stepping down from his leadership positions in the Senate. He will step down when the new Congress is sworn in, but he has no intention of leaving the Senate. He turns 83 next February. He also despises Rick Scott. So this is going to be the first battle within the party, the fight for Senate Majority Leader. Now, Scott was in charge of getting Republicans elected to the Senate during the 2022 midterms. He was the National Republican Senatorial Committee chairman, and he performed a dismal job with Democrats expanding their majority by 1 seat. That was totally unexpected. Polling showed a massive red tsunami didn't materialize. The Democrats were expected to lose some Senate seats. They picked up 1. And even in the House, the GOP barely took the House back. Scott earned Mitch McConnell's wrath by proposing 2 years ago that all federal agencies and programs be sundowned after 5 years so Congress could then vote whether to renew them. He said we should sundown Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, and then every 5 years we decide whether or not it's worth renewing. Rick Scott previously owned a chain of for-profit hospitals. That company was ordered to pay what at the time was the largest healthcare fine ever leveled by the Justice Department when Scott was found guilty of ripping off Medicare and Medicaid to the tune of nearly $1 billion. Sure, you got your $1 billion from Medicare and Medicaid, so now you want to sundown it after you got your opportunity to steal from it. John Cornyn of Texas and John Thune of South Dakota are also running for Senate Majority Leader. Thune, I believe, is Mitch McConnell's pick for Senate Majority Leader. In late-breaking news, Elon Musk has weighed in and endorsed Scott. He says Thune would be the top choice for Democrats. So where's he getting that from? Thune is Mitch McConnell's choice, obviously. Trump hates Mitch McConnell, therefore he hates Thune. So Musk endorsed Scott because Trump wants Scott. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. In an exclusive, Axios is reporting that Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton has enough votes to become the GOP conference chair. That will be the number 3 position in the Senate leadership once Democratic leader Chuck Schumer hands over control of the Senate to Republicans on, I believe it's January 3rd. Axios also reports that Trump quietly reached out to Senator Tom Cotton and asked if he'd be interested in running the CIA or becoming Secretary of Defense. Cotton said no, but that should give you an idea of how Trump plans to staff this White House with hard right authoritarians like Tom Cotton, who famously penned Tom Cotton famously wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times back in 2020 urging then-President Donald Trump to send the military into the streets to stop the Black Lives protests. In that piece for the New York Times, Cotton argued that Black Lives Matter protesters were insurrectionists. This was before January 6th. He said they were insurrectionists and that then-President Trump would be well within his rights to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would give Trump legal authority to use the United States military to quell violence in the streets. Now, the Posse Comitatus Act forbids the use of military to be brought in to control and or police citizens of the United States. But in Tom Cotton's piece for the New York Times, he argued that once the president invokes the Insurrection Act, the Posse Comitatus Act is automatically superseded. Cotton cited George Herbert Walker Bush in 1992 during the Rodney King riots, ordering the Army's 7th Infantry as well as 1,500 Marines onto the streets of Los Angeles to restore order. This is who Donald Trump offered the post of Secretary of Defense to. It's important to remember that Tom Cotton is a liar and that the Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful. Every single report and study shows they were nonviolent, that looting was performed by outside agitators, the shootings by Kyle Rittenhouse, and that the only violence on the streets during the Black Lives Matter protests, the only violence was started when police officers began clubbing protesters, sometimes, like here in New York, literally driving their patrol cars into them. Millions and millions of damages have been paid out by police departments around the country to settle lawsuits filed by Black Lives Matter protesters. What do you think? Will we be able to have peaceful protests in our country with Trump as our president? Will all protests be seen as acts of violence necessitating the invocation of the Insurrection Act? If it's no longer safe to protest, do we protest anyway? Or are there other ways to express disapproval without giving people like Tom Cotton a reason to crush your skull? I don't know. The Trump White House is going to marshal all the forces of artificial intelligence to create an alternative reality that is going to make it really difficult to convince his supporters and the people working for him that he is lying. We've entered a new age of artificial intelligence where Trump, no doubt, will have a propaganda arm inside his White House, and stuff coming out of that White House will not be true. You heard J.D. Vance admit that he lied about Haitians eating dogs and pets. He said he lied because he said it's okay to lie if it's in the service of a larger mission. Vance said it was okay to lie about Haitians if it drew attention to the problem of Haitians in Springfield. Well, the problem, of course, isn't Haitians in Springfield. The problem is racism. But when you think you have God on your side, there's nothing you're incapable of saying, believing, or doing. If ever our country needed critical thinking, it is now. If ever our country needed rational thinking, it is now. I don't know what the answer is other than telling the truth, obeying the law, and making sure everyone, especially people like Tom Cotton and Donald Trump, making sure they obey the law as well. I need not remind you there are a lot of people itching for physical violence. Don't give them an excuse to throw a punch or you in jail. You don't want to be on the receiving end of violence. Stay away from violent people. Some of the people who pose the most serious threat to this Republican Party, the most serious threat to them, or one of the most serious threats, are the quiet ones. Beware of the quiet ones. What can you do quietly, legally, peacefully? What can you do quietly? What would Dr. King say? Cotton replaces the current GOP conference chair, Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, who is pretty much a lock to take the number 2 Senate leadership position of Majority Whip. Where are we? The Democratic Party needs to be rebuilt. We have become a party of elites, whether we abandoned working class people, whether they abandoned us, whether it's some combination of all of the above. Those are the words of Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She's a Democrat from Washington State, as well as the chairwoman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Shell-shocked. That's how those closest to Kamala Harris were described on election night. CNN reported that top Harris aides, well past 9 p.m. Tuesday night, were still convinced they were going to win, and they were on the phone with people like President Biden telling him not to worry. On Wednesday, David Plouffe, Obama's campaign manager, who was brought in to help the Harris campaign, he took to Twitter and blamed the loss on President Biden, and then reacted to the backlash from that statement by deleting his account. Real courage of your convictions there, David Plouffe. I warned you about David Plouffe before he even joined the Harris campaign. Like Nancy Pelosi, Plouffe, along with other key Harris staffers, believe that Joe Biden dug a gigantic hole that made it impossible for Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party to dig out of. There are David Plouffe issues. According to new reporting in Notice, that's Notus, it's the News of the United States, Notice. According to Notice, some Harris staffers warned before the election that Obama world advisors like David Plouffe had overemphasized appealing to white women in the suburbs, and they were neglecting black women voters in the suburbs. They complained that because of that strategy, Harris failed to win over suburban women, and she only made gains. She only outperformed Joe Biden among college-educated females. Other staffers repeatedly warned that David Plouffe was moving Harris to the center, encouraging her to spend way too much time on joint appearances with Liz Cheney, who they feared would push hardcore Democrats away, make them stay home on November 5th. Illinois Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker said he's as confused as we all are. He asked after the election, quote, "Why is it that Donald Trump did 8 points better than he did against Hillary Clinton in Illinois, and yet down ballot Democrats held every office and gained at the local level across the state?" So Harris won Illinois. Hillary Clinton won Illinois. But Donald Trump did 8 points better last Tuesday than he did against Hillary Clinton. It's an interesting question. Right now, if you look at the early data, it's not that Harris underperformed the Democratic Party. It's that Trump overperformed the Republican Party. Harris, however, did underperform Joe Biden in 2020 when it comes to the popular vote, but so did Donald Trump. That being said, in the key battleground states, in the blue wall, Trump got more votes in Pennsylvania this time around than Biden got in Pennsylvania back in 2020. Same goes for Wisconsin. In Michigan, Biden got 2.8 million votes in 2020, and Trump got 2.8 million in 2024. There'll be plenty of time for infighting. I'm not sure if, considering the threat we're under, pointing fingers right now when we need to continue to fight for our rights. Not sure if Democrats should be feeding on one another. But the knives have come out, and I knew they would. And it's probably healthy, and it's probably a sign of optimism that it's business as usual, that they're planning for the midterms. It's a good sign. Notice reports that there's plenty of blame going around inside the Harris-Walz campaign offices after Tuesday's defeat. Staffers felt marginalized. Well, I'm a one-man operation, and I feel marginalized by this show. I mean, who doesn't feel marginalized? Some complained there was a 9-to-5 culture with too many top-level aides, only doing what was required of them and then checking out. Some black staffers felt marginalized and mistreated. A few considered filing official complaints, but feared retaliation. Tone deaf on Gaza. Notice reports that some Harris staffers felt sidelined and not listened to, especially after warning that it was bad politics not to allow a Palestinian, someone like Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, a Palestinian, to speak at the Democratic convention. It is pretty remarkable that Rashida Tlaib was not allowed to speak at the Democratic convention. Politico reports that the Harris-Walz campaign, as of this morning, is $20 million in debt, despite raising more than $1 billion in the past 90 days. How did you spend $1 billion and not win? What the F? Those are the words of an anonymous Biden White House staffer leaking to Politico. Of course, they wouldn't have the courage to give their name. Another anonymous top Harris consultant told Puck that Democrats wasted way too much money trying to win Iowa and trying to help Colin Allred down in Texas beat Ted Cruz. Really? These are political consultants who are loyal only to themselves. They feel left out. They feel they weren't listened to. They feel they should have gotten a bigger percentage of the ad buys, and they're leaking away because the party is run by political consultants who are already, they don't care about democracy. They're already planning 2022. Luckily, this is also going on in the Trump campaign. Human nature is one of the great checks and balances. The fact that everybody is jealous, competitive, and resentful, and they fight among themselves, it's what keeps parties and people from getting too powerful. Although Trump threatens violence, I have a feeling his Senate and House will be marching in lockstep. I have a feeling. Be interesting to see who's going to start leaking at that White House. I know Kellyanne Conway was the big leaker over there. When people get marginalized, and they always do, they leak, they gossip, they undermine. It's going to be interesting to see how Trump cracks the whip in the White House. Well, the Harris campaign is $20 million in debt. It's not her fault. It's the Democratic Party's fault. So Donald Trump, after hearing that the Harris campaign was $20 million in debt, he took to social media to mock Democrats. He wrote, "I'm very surprised that the Democrats, who fought a hard and valiant fight in the 2024 presidential election, raising a record amount of money, didn't have a lot of money left over. Now they are being squeezed by vendors and others." He says, whatever we can do to help them during this difficult period, I would strongly recommend we as a party, and for the sake of desperately needed unity, do. Well, okay, that's kind of funny. So the question is, what happened to the money? How is the campaign $20 million in debt? Notice said much of the money being raised was spent on raising more money, and that there ended up being a negative return on that investment. So when you donate to the Democratic Party, your money is being used to raise more money. Act Blue, for example, seemed to be more concerned, according to Notice, with getting tipped on its platform. After you donate, Act Blue would ask for a tip, and they were more concerned about that than signing up volunteers. One of the complaints is that after people donated, they weren't given forms to fill out to learn how to volunteer. I am still being inundated with requests for money from every Democrat running for office. Still. But nobody's asking me or telling me how I can volunteer for them. Maybe stop asking us for money. That seems to be the consensus among a lot of Democrats who donated. Stop asking me for money. 700,000 Democratic donors in swing states ended up unsubscribing to Kamala Harris's email list in the weeks leading up to the election. This suggests they were turned off by the nonstop appeals for money that came with very little assistance in showing how else we could help. Leave a comment. What was your experience donating, if you donated, to candidates? Was the follow-up email asking you for more money, or was it a follow-up on how you can phone bank, door knock, get a lawn sign? My experience was mostly, give me more money. According to Notice, the Harris campaign, due to structural problems left over from the Biden campaign, was unable to harness the enthusiasm for Kamala Harris. Because of structural problems, they found it harder to turn donors into door knockers. But that being said, Harris's ground game far exceeded that of Donald Trump's. But I still believe you need a ground game. If you look at the Senate races, all the down ballot candidates, maybe even Bob Casey, won in the swing states. That's because of a solid ground game. So we knew how the presidential race would play out by early Wednesday morning. Some final results trickled in over the weekend. In Nevada, Trump beat Kamala Harris, but Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen kept her seat. And more than 60% of Nevada voters chose to enshrine the right to an abortion in their state constitution. So once again, we see ticket splitting. Democrats doing very well down ballot, while Trump is outperforming his own party. Same for Arizona, with more than 60% voting to enshrine abortion in their state constitution, just like Nevada. But in the race for president, Arizona went for Trump. Now, all the races for president have been called, all the state races. In the lead up to Election Day, we anticipated days, if not weeks, until learning the final count, but it all came much sooner, less than a week. Again, Arizona was officially called for Trump over the weekend. Trump won with 52.6% of the vote. Meanwhile, Republican candidate for Senate Kari Lake looks poised to lose her race to Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego, although that race has yet to be called. But right now, he leads her by about 45,000 votes. And I think he's won it. Arizona, again, also passed a constitutional amendment guaranteeing a woman's right to an abortion up to about 24 weeks. Trump outperformed two important down-ballot races in Arizona, abortion and Kari Lake. And I said on the last show, putting abortion on the ballot might have backfired for Democrats. I think it allowed people to vote for abortion and Trump. It allowed them to say, except for abortion, I like Trump, so I'll vote for abortion and Trump. Here's the final map. Take a look. That is the final map. Trump's final count, 312 electoral votes. That's 6 more than what Biden got in 2020. It pales in comparison to Obama's 365 electoral votes in 2008 and the 332 electoral votes that Obama got in 2012. Ronald Reagan got 525 electoral votes in 1984. This is not a mandate or a landslide. Before Democrats panic, before Trump thinks he has a mandate, before Democrats think there are lessons to be learned from this election, take a good hard look at this map from 1984. This is what an actual mandate is. It's Reagan's reelection in 1984, where Democrat Walter Mondale got 13 electoral votes. He carried his home state of Minnesota and Washington, D.C. You are looking at what gave rise to Clinton, Obama, and the corporatist wing of the Democratic Party. It is this 1984 electoral map. It sparked the formation of the Democratic Leadership Council, which moved the party, the Democrats, to the right, preaching market-based solutions instead of government ones. They preached entitlement reform. It was Bill Clinton who kind of got rid of welfare. They called themselves moderates, and by doing so, opened the door to big, wealthy donors who were perfectly okay with the Democratic Party's agenda when it came to social issues like abortion, marriage equality, civil rights, but they were not okay with the Democratic Party attending to the needs of the poor and working class. Some say it was the Democratic Leadership Council that taught Bill Clinton how to win the presidency in 1992. Came 8 years after the Reagan landslide that you're looking at. But others, including me, say that the Democratic Leadership Council is why Democrats lost control of the House in 1994 for the first time in 42 years. It's this map that prompted Bill Clinton in his first inaugural speech to declare the era of big government is over. This is the map that's responsible for the Democrats losing the working class. This is it, 1984. Right here is why the Democrats lost the working class. Now, it started in 1972 when George McGovern lost to Richard Nixon pretty much with an identical map. And Democrats were beginning to abandon the working class back then. They elected Jimmy Carter in 1976, who was all for deregulation. He was not a progressive liberal. That's why Tip O'Neill, who was the Democratic Speaker of the House, and Senator Teddy Kennedy, in many ways sabotaged his presidency. It's why Teddy Kennedy primaried Jimmy Carter in 1980, because old school Democrats felt Jimmy Carter was not progressive enough. By 1984, this map taught Democrats the answer: we win when we take corporate money. We win when we make friends with Wall Street and betray the working class. Now, Biden, who has always been a corporatist, he became the first Democratic president since Johnson to move the Democratic Party towards the progressive wing. But he only did that once he was inside the Oval Office. He did not run as a progressive. This is the final map. It is not 1984. It's 2024. The races were very close in Nevada, Arizona, South Carolina, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. There are no great lessons to be learned. Harris got 226, Trump got 312. Trump won the popular vote, but he underperformed Joe Biden's popular vote in 2020. Biden got more than 81 million votes. Trump will be lucky this time around if he gets to 75 million, which is about what he got in 2020. This is far from a mandate. The lesson to take from this is not that the Democrats should move to the center. The lesson is Trump is a liar, and there are a lot of people who believed those lies. The lesson is the Democratic Party made some huge mistakes. They ran against Trump more than they ran on making big, bold policy. Now, I get why Harris played it safe. She only had 3 months. She ran to the center. She ran towards Liz Cheney sometimes, and some feel she ran away from the progressive wing of the party. I'm out of time, and I don't want to do my post-mortem, so I'm going to wrap it up. I will continue with this on the next show. The lesson to be learned from this election is we have to keep on fighting, and we need solidarity. And we have to figure out how to win the working class, poor people. This country does not work for more than half its citizens. Half this country cannot come up with $500 for an emergency. We have to fight Trump and promote policy that makes it so half this country can come up, can pay for an emergency. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you to Bob in the chat room. Thank you to Mila in the chat room. Get to work. Get to work. Stay positive. Don't be afraid, but be smart. But stay positive. And obey the law. Pay your taxes. Don't engage in violence. Appeal to your state and local leaders, especially if they're Republicans. Appeal to corporations and businesses and make sure they're protecting undocumented Americans. The fight starts now to keep them in our country and not have them be terrorized. If you're not doing that, if you're not fighting for the undocumented migrants, the undocumented immigrants, you're partly to blame. It's not good enough to complain about Homan, this new border czar. Oh, I can't believe what he's about to do. If you're not writing letters, calling Republicans, Democrats, business leaders, and fighting for the Haitian migrants, for all the migrants, for all the immigrants, this terror that could be unleashed, partly your fault. Please subscribe to my newsletter, this channel. Please share this with your friends. Oh, let me sell some crap here. So I have maybe make some money. Here's some crap over at shopdavidfeldman.com that you shouldn't buy. The Trump coffee mugshot, the souvenir from Donald Trump's 2029 inaugural ball. He and Melania look very happy. It's not too early to start preparing for Trump 2028 as a Trump 2028 coffee mug. If you're going to the inauguration, you might want to pick up a official Trump fart filtration mask. It's what the pros use. Might want to get an appeal to heaven. An appeal to these nuts flag. I love that. An appeal to these nuts. A Still a Democrat t-shirt, a Still a Democrat coffee mug. Is that it? I think that's it. Oh, and the Donald Trump and Edvard Munch's The Scream. I'm such a good salesman. And hope you're in the mood for diarrhea. Chef's apron for Thanksgiving. Thank you. No show tomorrow, the day after tomorrow at Tooth Hurdy. Thank you so much.